Hello mate, welcome back to the channel. We are here once again with another Ascendancy class design. This time we're going to be taking a look over at the Shadow and we're bringing back the Saboteur. Now I personally, I don't know about you, to me Saboteur is a very niche class in PoE 1 and I maybe had one or two characters where I played around with a Sabo. But it always felt like something that if you specifically wanted to play traps then you had to take that. And as much as we're going to be doing quite a bit with traps and mines, I also wanted to offer a little bit of an opportunity to do something else with it. So you will be the judge, as always, if you think I've achieved that. And to all you trap and mine lovers out there, hopefully you're also kept very happy with this. Let's find out. Let's get into it. Okay, here we are at the presentation screen. You can see some of the artwork, an overview of the tree. As you can see, we've got 3 duo nodes, we've got a trio node, a couple of T2s, so plenty to get into. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at the lore, concept, and the themes that inspired these nodes. The artist need not be present to make a lasting impression. The Saboteur is a living silhouette. A glint and a glimpse is all he will reveal. Master of underworld crafts and knowledge, he plots and waits for his intricate plans to reach their fruition. Each second pregnant with possibility, each mechanism destined for destruction. Tick, tick, tick. Alright, had a bit of fun with that one. I really enjoy that one. It's quite flavorful. So as you can tell, we're still very much on the traps and mines. That's the first theme in the list. We've also got blind, cooldown, and suppression. And I know what you're thinking. Silver, they don't have suppression in PoE 2 anymore, or they might not, or do they? We don't know. But I think they might keep it in. That's my suspicion. I don't know if it's been confirmed anywhere, and I could well be wrong. But if not, then this is a slightly reworked idea of suppression. So let's get into it. Alright, we're going to kick off with the elephant in the room, and that is with traps. So for those of you that don't know, traps and mines have now been consolidated into a single archetype, and that is just traps. And you have 2 different types of trap item.
We have sort of combined the concept of trappers and miners into one thing. Mines are also trap skills, but with a different detonation type. So traps are no longer spells. Traps are just trap damage.
So let's move up and see what we're doing with the Saboteur for this. Got increased trap throw speed and trap damage, and then we've got our first duo node. And so this then reveals why in the artwork we have rats everywhere, and that is because I really like the idea of this guy being like an underground spy who's in the sewer network, and he's trained rats, and he has these little mechanisms that he straps to them and they go off and do things. So we've got different types of rats and different ways of triggering our traps. Pit rats and homing rats. We'll start off with pit rats. Fester in the moving floor. Your proximity trigger traps create rat pits for 8 seconds after activating. Rat pits hinder all enemies and deal 3% of the trap's damage per second. So this is in addition to the initial trap damage. Enemies inside rat pits are culled. So at the bottom here, I've just put a little note that by default, a character can have 15 traps out at once. That was in PoE 1. And the area is equal to the size of the trap area of effect. That's the area size of the rat pit. So after you detonate a trap, there is a proximity trigger trap. Then you're going to be getting rat pits on the floor. On the flip side, we've got homing rats. So if rat pits was for proximity traps, your traditional traps, this is for your mine style traps, your manual trigger traps. So your manual trigger traps are attached to rats that spread amongst enemies. Increases to trap throw speed affects rats' movement speed. 50% chance for homing rats to be twinned. So this is basically, instead of you popping a mine down, you know, where you are or throwing it out, you're essentially, every time you use a manual trigger trap skill, you are going to be strapping that to a rat, and then AI is going to be taking these sort of invulnerable rats that, you know, they can't be killed or anything. They're then going to go and seek out enemies. And I would imagine the AI would be based on targeting spread of enemies, but also targeting the most powerful enemy first. So if Rat Pits was about creating areas of damage, this is about creating very targeted kind of damage, and your homing rats have a 50% to be twinned, essentially meaning that you're getting a 50% more damage multi. The only difference being that you can't necessarily control exactly where those rats go. They're going to spread out and have their own kind of AI. Alright. If we wanted to double down on this, we've now got a lot of different ways to do it. So you've got some trap throw speed, which again is infecting the speed of your mice or rats. And then you've got 1% life regenerated per second per trap activation recently. So you can get 5% life regen if you're throwing out a lot of traps. This number might need to be slightly lower. All right, then we've got 3 here. So we've got rat glue, rat bite, and rat swarm. Let's start off with rat glue. The bile of disease binds them. Your homing rats, which are these guys here, attach to rare and unique enemies. An enemy takes 5% more damage per rat stuck to them. So remember, these are remote trigger rats. So you're going to be triggering these whenever you want. So if you want to let the rats build up and then all of a sudden you can blow them all up at once, you're getting some more multiplier. Your rat pits slow enemies' attack and cast speed by 30%. And rat pits are 25% longer. So regardless of which of these you pick, you're getting a benefit from each of these trio nodes here. And then on the bottom here, this is the same across all of them. Your traps have a 25% chance to rearm after activation. So this is essentially another 25% more damage multi. Alright, at the top we've got Rat Bite. Gain 8 gnawing rats. Gnawing rats have a 2% chance to distract an enemy by taunting them for 1 second. Unique enemies are not taunted, but build stun instead. Gnawing rats spread ailments that you inflict. So the idea here is you have, and again, rats are invulnerable. I imagine they're just too small for enemies to kind of to bother with them, and they get into all the cracks and crevices. And these gnawing rats, what they do is they're constantly going to be taunting normal, magic, or rare enemies for a second at a time. Now, an enemy can't be taunted. I should have put this in the subsection here, but you can't taunt an enemy if it's been taunted within 4 seconds. So this isn't going to be happening all the time, constantly, like, you know, essentially stun locking rares and stuff like that. But it's just a constant thing that is allowing a level of mitigation where they're not focused on you. On top of that, we've got the unique enemies are not taunted but build stun. So when you are in an encounter with a boss and say it's just you, there's no ads or anything, then you've got these 8 rats that are constantly going to be building up stun. So you're essentially getting like a passive build up of stun on the boss, which I thought was a very nice quality of life thing. And again, 25% chance to rearm. And then we've got the most interesting one out of these. It's a skill, you gain the Rat Swarm spell. Move on a carpet of rats whilst you channel, removing any speed reduction, and then you get 25% chance to rearm as well. So what is the Rat Swarm spell? Rat Swarm has attacks spell, channeling, AoE, and physical. Costs 15 mana per second to channel. Cast speed and damage effectiveness are all the same. Here's a description. You channel on your cursor to continually spawn rats from all corpses. Rats rush towards your cursor, releasing the channel causes all rats to explode, dealing physical damage. Cast speed increases the rat spawn rate. And then the specifics of this are you can summon, this is between level 1 to 20 as an example, you can summon up to 4 to 8 rats per corpse, 0 to 50% increased summon speed, rats deal a certain amount to a certain amount of physical damage, and then rats deal 2% more damage per rat that explodes. You have a maximum of 25 to 50 rats. So that last line's important because there could be a scenario where you could essentially get, you know, like 50 corpses in a certain area, and then you would create like a nuclear bomb of rats, which would be slightly overpowered. So this is the idea that you essentially have a kind of channeling spell that you can still move whilst you're channeling at a slowed rate. However, the Ascendancy node allows you to move faster. And you're just going to be summoning tons and tons of rats, and they're all going to be swarming. I imagine like a really interesting kind of visual effect that you could create, maybe the artist could create, where you've just got tons and tons of these rats all falling over each other. If you've ever seen a rat swarm, it is pretty wild. So we've got these kind of very functional elements here of adding to the way that your traps work, and then we've got some really interesting ways of doubling down on that and getting some other kind of rat-themed bonuses here and quality of life. Now I think what we should do is keep on this and move over to the left. So we're getting area of effect and area damage, and then we've got 2 nodes here, connected network and underground network. Start off on the left-hand side. Ailments inflicted by your explosions, and explosions include traps and grenades, are inflicted by all other explosions within 3 seconds of each other. So essentially, any ailment that you inflict from an explosion, within 3 seconds of that triggering, every other explosion that you trigger will also trigger that ailment. And then the highest ailment will be the one that applies, or if you're stacking poisons, explosions, this would stack those. So whether it's a stackable or a single ailment, it's going to be spreading from all of the explosions that happen around it. And then we've got underground network. Why put yourself in danger? You spawn 1 trigger rat every second. So PoE 1 players will just be laughing right now because I've just stolen trigger bots essentially and kept them on our little rats. And you can kind of see in the image here, they've got like these little armored rats. But it does work slightly differently to trigger bots. So any area skills or Nova skills that would center on you instead activate from your trigger rats. Triggered spells do not overlap. After 8 seconds, trigger rats explode, dealing 30% of all damage they triggered. So there's a couple of intricacies here that I'll just detail. So the first thing is essentially these trigger rats you can have 8 at any time because you're spawning 1 per second and they last 8 seconds before exploding. The overlap of these spells, so these spells don't get overlap damage. There's no sort of shotgunning or overlapping. And I thought the reason I didn't want to do that is because it's a very like runaway kind of mechanic. Like that can create a lot of problems and be quite frustrating to get right. So I thought instead of, you know, making it overlap, and it's not about damage stacking, it's just about spreading the area. Why not then have a damage kind of bonus here that is triggered off of the amount of damage you can trigger off these rats? They then deal 30% of that when they explode. So they're kind of storing up a bit of that energy that you've spent through their life cycle, and then they explode at the end of it, which I thought would be a really cool. You could add like a little beeping sound, and it's like, and then they blow up. So yeah, just had some fun with that. There's something about this rat thing which just really sells it for me. It makes me instantly want to play this, and I just had a lot of fun doing this. I'm sure it's not for everyone, but I had a lot of fun doing this. So yeah, hopefully a few of you agree. Right. I think on the last trap section, so there's a lot of kind of trap stuff here, but also one thing that I wanted to point out is a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily have to be around traps. There's grenade options here, but then there's also things like area spells, and then even the trap nodes, you might be just using those as a supplementary thing and then gaining the benefits and using other things in your other hand or, you know, your other skill sets. So let's have a look at Clink Can. So Clink Can is a meta skill, and you can socket any area skill into the Clink Can. So this isn't just traps. Every 3 seconds, you attach a Clink Can to a nearby enemy. So nearby, apparently we don't have nearby in the game anymore. Let's say within 2 meters of you, you can attach a Clink Can. This happens passively, and Clink Cans will detonate after 6 seconds. If the enemy dies, or can be manually triggered. So there's 3 ways that these Clink Cans will go off. After 6 seconds of nothing happening, if that enemy that they're attached to dies, they'll go off, or you can manually trigger them by pressing the Clink Can skill if you put it on your hotbar. If no enemy is nearby, then you leave the Clink Can behind you as a proximity trap. So even if you're not getting up and close, or you're away from enemies, maybe you're running away, you're going to be leaving these behind you. And these, again, this is a meta skill, so you can socket any skill into it, and you can support those skills. You could have 3 active skill gems and 2 supports on like a 5 link. It's up to you. So super flexible. But I really like the idea that this offered the Saboteur a kind of gameplay option where if you want to be in melee, let's say you were dual wielding daggers in your main first weapon setup, then you could be in there doing that kind of stuff, playing around with stealth, playing around with lots of kind of evasion, but passively you're constantly just slapping these kind of sticky grenades, these Clink Cans onto people, and then they're exploding and they're delivering a payload that is of your design. Equally, if you want to be at range, you're just leaving these behind you all the time. Really happy with this design, and also very happy with the flavor text on this one. Clink, clink, boom. All right, now let's look at something a little bit different, and that is kind of harkening back to what the Saboteur offered, and I wanted to expand on it, which is all about cooldown and the idea of this person having, you know, immaculate timing, then being like a bomb specialist, or even like a thief, you know, like being able to kind of just constantly work out the right opportune moment. And so we've got this, like Clockwork, 30% increased cooldown recovery rate. So this is a very powerful and very diverse stat. You could build, you know, cooldown recovery rate is going to be valuable for many builds in the game. And so I wanted to offer some flexibility here. Nearby enemies have 30% reduced cooldown rate. So this is for bosses, this is for all enemies. all of their skills that essentially in the back end will revolve on a kind of cooldown, you are basically reducing their ability to use those powerful effects by 30%, which I thought was cool. That could be like memory game, you know, for Maven maybe, you know, even, and then all the way down to like Hillock and him doing like a slam or something like that. Not Hillock, sorry, the bloated Miller, who I think the community are always going to call Hillock. Every time a trap or mine is activated, you gain 1% increased cooldown recovery rate for 4 seconds. So if you are doing traps, I actually need to get rid of that. I shouldn't say mines, they're just traps, people. But if you are doing traps, then this is a nice synergistic thing for you, getting a little bit of an extra effect here. Now, if you want to double down on the cooldown stuff, we've got wind down and wind up. So we'll start with wind up. Turn the hands of time in your favor. You can hold down any skill on cooldown to actively double its cooldown recovery rate. Using a skill has a 20% chance to reduce an active cooldown by 1 second. Killing a rare or unique enemy resets a cooldown. So let's just look at the first bit. I was so happy when this came into my head because I thought, what's an interesting kind of proactive gameplay thing that you can do to, you know, to work with your cooldowns and not always have it passive. I thought, yeah, there you go. So this is essentially you channeling. You can't do anything else whilst you're holding this button. But if you do want to spend time holding the button, you're slowed by 70% whilst using this. So there is a bit of a drawback. But yeah, you're endangering yourself to quickly try and, you know, fast forward the clock and get the cooldown ready. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with this one. Obviously rewarding you for killing a rare and unique is fun as well. And then we've got wind down. So this is doubling down on the enemy reduction. So enemies have 2% reduced cooldown recovery rate per 1% life missing. This also affects you. 1% reduced ailment duration per 1% life missing. So let's split these two halves of this out. The top section, you can massively reduce a boss's ability to use certain cooldowns. However, the same is then also true of you. So if you're getting down to 20% life, then your cooldowns are basically never going to return. And so this relies, there's a bit of a drawback and a play to making this commitment. On the other side of the node, we've got this 1% reduced ailment duration, and that is just a straight up massive buff. So if you've lost 80% of your life, you're down to 20%, then you're getting an 80% reduced ailment duration on you, which I think is really, really powerful. But this is a T2 node. And yeah, just had a load of fun with these. I'm like, yeah, actually now I'm going through this, I'm realizing how much I loved doing this Ascendancy. I had a lot of fun with it. All right, and now we've got increased movement speed whilst in stealth and 20% increased evasion rating. If you saw the Trickster, you will have seen that we put a option to gain stealth in there. And we've also done this with the other Shadow Ascendancy, which I'll be showing soon. Stealth is an idea to me that we've kind of conceptualized, I guess, as we've been going through these, because we haven't seen a lot of Shadow gameplay yet. I haven't seen any Shadow gameplay yet, apart from a very small snippet. And we don't know what kind of kit they're going to offer and what unique things they're going to be bringing for that kind of play style. And so I imagine that stealth is going to be a part of this. And all we've said with stealth is it's quite a simple idea that enemies can't see you. And if you get within maybe a certain radius of an enemy or you attack, then you come out of stealth, and then there'll be different ways to maybe generate stealth. So for the Saboteur, what we've done is just given you a very simple passive. Every 6 seconds you go into stealth. Now if you attack as soon as you go into it, then you've lost it for 6 seconds. This is a nice passive generation. And then whilst you have stealth, you can charge an AoE ability by holding it. Charging doesn't break stealth, and you gain 25% more damage per second charged up to 6 seconds. So the idea of this is you are, this is like the bomb, the ticking bomb kind of expert. You're waiting in the shadows and you're charging up an ability that you're just going to devastate and surprise enemies with. Now, will there be enemies and rares in the game if we had something like this that have true sight and they can see you even if you are stealthed? I think that would be a really cool way to counter the ability of stealth without making it rubbish. You just give enemies tools to solve it. But yeah, this idea of charging up and attacking, going ham on it feels cool. And then we've got at the bottom, this is the suppression thing, 25% chance to suppress ongoing and new damage over time effects while stealthed. Bit of a typo there. But essentially, the idea of suppression that I have, and I don't know if this is how it will work. We've got a theory that it might work against area. damage, so we know that dodging and blocking doesn't, you know, you're still going to be affected by area of effect stuff. Maybe suppression's in the game and it's kept as a new thing that isn't to do with spells, but it suppresses against area damage. Deflect, we know, acts like suppression, but that's for hits. One other option would be that suppression might actually suppress the effect of damage over time on you, and that could be an interesting role that suppression could play in the defensive mix, because in PoE 1 quite often damage over time is like an incredibly hard thing to deal with, and it would be really cool to have an option on your stats and on your items to be able to counter that if you choose to. So the way I imagine that working is you're going to be getting like 50%, essentially 50% damage mitigation every second when suppression triggers. So every second you get an opportunity to suppress for the next second, and that will suppress at 50% rate against all damage over time effects. All right, now let's have a look at Patience in Shadow. They merely adopted the dark.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
Yeah, I have to throw a few fun little Easter eggs in here. Alright, you cannot be blinded. This is bringing back that blind node from PoE 1, changing it up a bit. Blind nearby enemies and enemies you hit. You have a 25% chance to suppress damage over time from blinded enemies, that should say. So again, going off this suppression idea, you're getting another 25% chance every second to suppress the next second's worth of damage over time. And then 50% increased blind effect against enemies you have suppressed damage from. So this is just nice suppression stuff, nice blind, more blind effect if you're getting that trigger. Yeah, simple, effective defensive layer. All right, now let's get some area effect and damage, and the last node on the tree, and that is Reactive Agent. Bit of a double entendre on the agent thing, and I really did think it would be cool if the Saboteur, you know, they're kind of this underground figure, shady figure, but maybe they were an agent, or maybe they aspire to be an agent, or think of themselves as an agent. Your skills have 25% chance to deal 50% more area damage with 100% increased area of effect. You take 10% less area damage from hits, and you have 20% chance to take 50% less area damage from hits. Again, there's a PoE 1 node, kind of similar to this. It's just taking that and then trying to sort of like bolden it up and make it a little bit more interesting mechanically, and hopefully when you're playing it, you would really feel when this went off. You know, you get hit with a big slam and you only take half damage from it. It's pretty effective. Let me know what you think, because for me, this was... I'll be honest, like, this is probably one of the Ascendancies I'm proudest of in this series, because it was one that I didn't really feel much love for in PoE 1, but I felt that I was, with this, able to kind of add some interesting things to traps and keep the love for traps within the Ascendancy, but also open up tons and tons of opportunities with area skills, with stealth, with cooldowns, that you could, you know, play around with. And I think if I'm going to pick a favorite node, do you know, it's really, 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 really hard for this one. I really like so many of them. The whole rat thing I think is cool, like this homing rats idea of just every time you put a trap down, it's off and then it, you know, it's ready to detonate. It really was inspired by that scene in Wanted. If you remember that film from, like, I think it was like the 2000s or something. James McAvoy film with Angelina Jolie. And then things like Rat Swarm, right? Like just having this ability where you're just summoning rats from corpses that almost would feel kind of like, you know, quite witch-like, but you're doing it in this sort of like quite spy-like, you know, trainer of rats way. I thought was quite cool. The Clockwork stuff and the cooldown stuff I think is really, really cool. Wind up, like the ability to actually focus on a cooldown skill and sacrifice some, you know, time and just like double that up when you really want it. Imagine in a boss fight you really want to get a big explosion off, you know they're coming up to their stun threshold and you're like, right, have this ready. And then, yeah, do you know what? I know what I'm gonna go with, I think, which is Clink can. This to me is a perfect example of what meta skills are going to potentially bring to PoE 2. And I say it's a perfect example because it keeps an archetype of I'm creating a grenade, right? Like I'm creating a trap or a mine or a bomb or, you know, whatever you want to call it. But I'm doing it in my own way, and I'm able to essentially build my own little skill. You know, it's kind of like spell crafting in D&D or something. Right here, you're able to take a load of different skills and parts and supports, chuck them into something and build your own little version of, you know, like, I'm doing this because it feels very visceral. It feels like you can literally shovel these skills into something, into this Clink cannon, and slap it on someone. So yeah, it feels really, really fun, and it feels very flexible as well. So this is definitely, yeah, this head and shoulders above the rest, even though I like the rest of them. As you can tell, I'm pretty chuffed with this one. I am really curious to see what you guys think, if you'd want to play this, and what your favorite node is. Please do let me know in the comments below. Obviously, if you like the video, I'd really appreciate if you like it. And, you know, if you're enjoying this kind of stuff, we've got tons more to get through. We've got 15 more Ascendancies to share, as well as some entirely new redesigns of League content. We've got podcasts coming out. We've got all sorts of good stuff. So, yeah. Please subscribe if you want to see more of it. We're really trying to push the channel into PoE 2. And a quick thank you to all of you who have been sending love so far. You've sent me emails, you've sent me messages, you've joined the Twitch, you've subscribed, all this stuff. I'm going to do a big channel update video at some point in the next few weeks, and I'll sort of explain my thinking about the channel and what I want to do going forward, and some scheduling stuff. And yeah, just very exciting times. You guys have kind of made this go from something that started off as just, let me try making one video about an Ascendancy, into something that feels like a very real thing now. I feel like an actual YouTuber, which is probably funny to say, but yeah, I'm really excited to see maybe where over the next sort of 6 to 12 months this might be able to take us. So big announcement as well, we are going to be launching a Discord at some point, okay? A couple of you have been asking about it, and I love the kind of culture and community that we've been getting together. Lots of, you know, very just fun-loving, creative, and ideas-driven people who love design, love the sort of art side of things. You know, as I've talked about quite openly, I've actually shown demonstrations of me creating artwork on stream and on Reddit and stuff, but, you know, I use DALL-E from OpenAI in ChatGPT. That generates a lot of the kind of collages, you know, a lot of the different ideas, and then I cut lots of pieces out, my favorite bits, I collage it all together, I paint over it, and then make it all sort of seamless, and then paint my own little bits in there and stuff like that. So a lot of these rats, for example, are quite hand placed and then, you know, painted in, and then even like the environment is probably a stitch of like 5 different things. So yeah, I'm not going to claim that I'm like a great artist or, you know, fantastic digital artist or anything. I will leave that to the professionals, but certainly, you know, I do put quite a bit of effort into it, just to try and sell the fantasy and stuff like that. So yeah, thank God for these tools that make it possible to do it, you know, try and get one of these out every day. So thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you very much. We are going to have a full channel update, like I say, soon, but keep tuned because we've got a video every single day until early access. And then after that, we're going to be streaming a ton and just, you know, all exploring and enjoying Ray class together. So yeah, looking forward to it. Friends, exiles, I'll see you in the next one. Ta-da.